Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my review of Fear Street Part 2, which I believe is 1970 something. Let me just check to be absolutely sure. 1978. So this continues off of Fear Street Part 1, and just as a note, there will be spoilers, so we're just going to get into it right away. Spoilers in three, two, one, now. So continue straight off of where part one left off. Sam is possessed, and Dina is trying to get help with C. Behrman. Um, and so at first, C. Behrman is against it, but eventually decides to tell Dina and her brother her story. So we find out that in 1978, two sisters named Cindy and Ziggy were at this camp. When we heard about the camp in part one, we saw the killer in part one too. Um, but this is like the backstory giving us like context and everything, as well as like really introducing us to C. Berman as a character. So Cindy is kind of this straight laced, very like by the numbers type of character. She's one of the counselors at this camp, one of the young teenage counselors, and she's trying to do her best. Her sister Ziggy, on the other hand, is very much not. Ziggy is a troublemaker. She's aggressive. She starts fights. She's beyond sassy. And she's played to perfection by Stranger Things alumni Sadie Sink. Um, so that's the second actress we've had from Stranger Things on, because we had Maya Hawke in the first one, in part one. So that's fun. Except here, Sadie Sink's character Ziggy is a main character, while Maya Hawke played more of a cameo role in part one. So there's also some other counselors, other students that are there. Um, Cindy has a boyfriend named Tommy. There's a couple other counselors, including these two druggies. Um, which there were these two teenagers in the first part too, so it seems like there's a little bit of a theme there. But people who have been into that stuff for a long time exist and definitely were around in 1978. And I'm not just talking, by the way, like marijuana and stuff, although that is featured. I'm talking more hard drugs and stuff as well. So yeah, just letting you know that off the bat. Um, so throughout this, we see kind of these characters going throughout their days at the camp, their day at the camp, just trying to just do what they're doing. And we see that the camp brings together both Shadyside and Sunnyvale, just like the funeral at the Sunnyvale football, the Sunnyvale High School football field did. Um, and we can see here, though, that Sunnyvale seems to be kind of running the camp. Like most of the kids there are from Sunnyvale and everything, with only a few kids and counselors from Shadyside. And we kind of get to see like all these characters through their issues. Again, Ziggy is very aggressive, but she's also looked down on by a lot of people, especially Sunnyvalers. She's looked at as a freak, a monster, and whatnot. Some people even call her a witch bitch. And like even the opening scene of this movie starts with her being not just bullied, but violently tortured by a few of these kids, to the point where she's like, where they're basically threatening to hang her. They threaten to burn her, and it's mostly this one girl who's the worst with it. The others even acknowledge that they're going too far. Um, and one of the others in this, one of the other counselors, is the cop from the first movie. So he's here too. So as they're just going along, we see like just a lot of this bullying, a lot of the just kind of issues all these characters are dealing with. And then things start to get more intense once Sarah Fear arrives, um, doing her possession thing as she does. Tommy is the one who ends up getting possessed and going on the killing spree. And eventually, throughout the film, the different groups of main characters, which is mainly Ziggy, Cindy, the two druggies, and the cop, I can't remember his name. But they're basically the ones who have to try to escape everything and fix everything and save everyone. And by the end, we find out that C. Berman and the cop were like the only main survivors. Um, so this movie is very much unlike part one. While part one definitely took a lot of inspiration from like a lot of the classic slasher fix and every or slasher films and everything. Well, flicks actually work still. A lot of the classic slasher flicks. I said fix the first time. It's supposed to be flicks. Um, this one definitely takes a lot of inspiration from the camp specific slasher flicks. The kind of stuff you think of like Friday the 13th and all of that. Um, uh, you definitely see a lot of the tropes. A lot of like the counselors will be having sex and stuff. You got the drug use. You got like the kids being kind of um, just not really treated well or ignored or just kind of um, not really like paid as much attention to as they should be. And you even have like a very typical horror trope in there's like this one like almost oracle like character who kind of like predicts things are going to get really bad before they do, and then the oracle character disappears for the rest of the movie. There's this nurse in the movie who's actually the mother of one of the people who were possessed by Seraphir, who were mentioned and even shown in the first film. Ruby, her mother is this camp nurse, and so she kind of acts like this oracle. She's like, "Oh, things are going to get bad." She's even studying on Seraphir and everything, and then she ends up trying to kill Tommy because she knows he's going to be the next killer, the next possessed person who goes on the killing spree. So yeah, but then she ends up being taken away by the cops and all, and she just does not come back or anything. She's mentioned plenty throughout the rest of the film, but never actually comes back. Um, but a lot of these tropes and everything, and while the first part definitely focused a lot more on the supernatural element of the fear and everything, on just how to defeat it all and how to like figure out like all this that was happening with the witch and all these supernatural people like coming back from the dead and trying to kill our main characters and everything. This one, while definitely still going into that, focuses more on I guess you could say the physical horror. It definitely there were a couple moments in the first movie that definitely focused on a lot of like on some of kills and stuff, but this one takes it to another level. Definitely becoming more gruesome to watch. There's even some scenes where like these innocent kids are violently murdered, and while the kids aren't shown being killed, it's like just off screen, like you see like maybe their legs and everything while they're being hacked up. You could still hear it, and it still like shows you like it's right off screen basically. It's still really fucking gruesome, and the kids who die, like the young kids, are are innocent. They're the innocent ones. They're nice. They're bullied. They're just these completely innocent kids, and they're just violently murdered, and it's horrific. It actually made me kind of sick to watch. but not in a bad way, because that was clearly the intent. It was supposed to upset you. It was supposed to be gruesome and horrifying. That's what the situation was supposed to be seen as. And even when the ones who are killed are the counselors who are a little older and whatnot, and the ones like you would expect more to be killed in these kind of films, it's still pretty dang gruesome and pretty dang hard to watch. Like you see one guy like get an and it's mostly done through an axe. See one guy get the axe slammed into his face over and over again. One guy is just straight up beheaded. There's another person who gets like sliced open in the chest and stuff, and it gets really gruesome. Um, and in the end, most of the characters, just like in the first film, most of the main characters die. But the ones who we obviously knew would survive, since this is a flashback, the first one took place in the 90s, this one is taking place in the 70s. We knew the characters who would survive, they do. Except there is a twist in here. See, C. Berman, throughout this film, we're thinking is Cindy. Because we know Cindy and Ziggy are the sisters, and so we're assuming Cindy is C. Berman, Cindy Berman. But we find out in the end that Ziggy is the one who survives. And we find out Ziggy is the nickname for Christine Berman. And I figured this out like very shortly before it actually was revealed, like maybe 5 minutes before it was revealed. It just kind of clicked in my head, like, what if that was the case? And there was a hint in the movie, but I thought it could have still gone either way. Because in the current day, in the 90s part, current day, you know what I mean, in the current day for where the films are at with Dina and Sam, C. Berman has a dog named Major Tom. Obviously, a reference to the songs by David Bowie. There are two different songs that feature Major Tom, I believe. Um, and so we go back to we flash back and see Berman's character Ziggy, obviously named for Ziggy Stardust, a persona that was taken on by David Bowie during his career. So my thought is either that Cindy would have named her dog after a David Bowie song in order to like pay tribute to her sister, or that was a hint that it had to be Ziggy who was C. Berman, and the second was right. It was Ziggy, and that her real name was just Christine, which we didn't know until the end of the film. Um, so it was a nice twist. I did figure it out right beforehand, but it was still well done and really well handled. Um, and we get to like get more depth into all of these characters because of it. We get to learn so much about Ziggy. We get to learn so much about the cop. These characters who do continue forward into the again current day section of the story. And so by the end, there's one thing that they realize. Apparently, returning the severed hand of um, Sarah Fear to the rest of her body will stop this. They tried to do this back in the 70s. So Dina and her brother go back to the mall where the tree that Sarah Fear was killed at is still the centerpiece of the mall. And the mall was literally built around it. So they dig into the ground that's still there because literally the mall was built around it instead of like them putting it into the mall. So they can still dig into the ground and they find, yeah, Sarah Fear's bone hand is still there. And they know where the rest of the body is buried because that was found in part one when the car that Sam and the others from Sunnyvale were in crashed into that ditch and everything because that's where Sam first basically got tagged to be possessed. um, So yeah, and so that's the goal now. That's how it's going to be stopped, by reuniting the hand with the rest of the body, which means that part three, which is going to show us 1666, the origin of Sarah Fear, where all of this began. We're also going to see, probably once again at the very beginning and very end of the film, the conclusion to Dina and Sam's story when they do bring it all back together and just stop the curse. And I'm very interested to see how that goes. But I really enjoyed this second film. It was very different, much more gruesome, and in some ways a little more like heavily character driven than the first. The first focused on like two characters being heavily focused on in terms of development, and the other ones were just kind of support. But this one had a lot more, and built up these characters a lot more. Both the characters that do appear in the future and the characters who die during the camp massacre. Um, so it builds on the characters a little more and focuses on their pains and their issues and everything. Um, more than the first one, more than part one did. But part one still did great with the characters. I'm not saying it didn't, but still. The gruesomeness was much heavier here. And it was still like chock full of good actors who did a fantastic job at every part. So I'm excited to see where this goes with the final film. And again, I will do a review of that. I'll probably get to it sooner than it took to get to this second one now that all three are out. Hopefully by the end of the week, but no guarantees. We'll see. But in the meantime, tell me what you thought of Fear Street Part 2, 1978, in the comments below. And thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.